Teachers, students, and parents are making this big transition into the new normal, where some are seeing this as an opportunity to teach life lessons to kids. Let's bring in Mike Rowe. He's host of Returning the Favor. And we'll talk about those kids in just a moment. But you had something you wanted to say about Julia Russell. She's the physical therapist in Nashville that was just furloughed and had to apply for unemployment. Her audio, we were having problems. It was not her fault. What did you want to say about her?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's a metaphor for our times, technical difficulties. We're all adjusting to do our own jobs in every imaginable relative way. She just got laid off from her job. And right now, there's this fascinating conversation going on your network and all the networks where we're making a distinction between essential workers and non-essential workers. And I think there's not to oversell it, but there's something tricky with the language going on here, because with regard to an economy, I don't think there's any such thing as a non-essential worker. What she does for money is obviously very important to her family, but it's also important to all of us because this is basically a quilt, and if you start pulling on jobs and tugging on careers over here and over there, the whole thing will bunch up in a weird way. Now, essential workers do exist, but in my mind, they exist more in the old dirty jobs modality, where you look at first responders and you look at garbage men and you look at plumbers and steam fitters and pipe fitters, right? And so I just wanted to make the point that when we talk about the economy, all work is essential. When we talk about the specifics of a job, when the chips are truly down, well, of course, times like these, you look to healthcare workers and firemen and sanitation engineers and so forth. So maybe it's a distinction without too much of a difference. But in my mind, there's no such thing right now as a non-essential worker.
Well, and I think that if you are somebody who maybe just had a double knee replacement and you have to go to physical therapy, Julia Russell is a physical therapist, and that's actually quite essential to your healing. And for that office to close, that is a huge problem. The other thing I wanted to mention to you, Mike, and have you address is a lot of people who work in these jobs that were just laid off, they're very prideful people. And they would never think to ask the government for anything. But in this situation where the government is mandating that you stay home, how can we convince people like that to accept the help that's being offered?
It's very, 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 very tough. You're talking about years of inertia. So many people, their very identity is wrapped up in their job. And when they lose their job, they kind of double down on their own romantic version of themselves, if that makes sense. And a lot of people I know go right into the category you're talking about. They would never ask for help until or unless the chips were really, really down. It's a bit like flattening the curve. You have to get in front of it. And so I think what you're saying is people have to get in front of their own notion of what's appropriate, what's dignified, what's humiliating, what's essential. What's essential right now is if you need help, ask for it. Because honestly, how do we know how long it will be there? Take it now. You need it now. Don't wait.
That's right. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, so we have moms and dads who are home and they're thinking, how do we do this? But I was reading an article about a woman who said, well, now would be a great time for me to teach my kids how to boil pasta. And a dad said, I'm going to teach my kids how to change a tire. Things like that. Practical life skills are also important to learn.
I've been saying this for years, but usually through the lens of my own foundation, who trains people in the skilled trades, but also connected to the cost of college, which, as we've discussed before, is somewhere between egregious and obscene. $1.6 trillion in student loans, right? I think that one of the silver linings that might come out of this when the dust settles is that people are going to get accustomed not only to communicating the way we are right now, but truly to learning. I just watched a lecture from MIT last week on this very device for free. The very same lecture you would pay an awful lot of money to sit through. And when you look at Harvard and when you look at William and Mary and Brown and MIT and some of these schools with $40 billion endowments, who are not issuing refunds, by the way, for the canceled courses, you start to realize, what are we really paying for? And the opportunity to truly learn, not just be entertained. I mean, of course, it's important to learn some of the basic life skills, of course. But I'm saying even beyond that, the business of sitting down and getting a useful education in the same dynamic that you and I are engaged in right now, that's real. And if 2 or 3 months from now, as things go back to something like normal, I don't think people are going to abandon this dynamic. I think it could completely redefine the way we learn. And I think I'd be a fool if I didn't mention, on returning the favor, we just found a principal in New Jersey, not far from you, who's giving out 125 of these Chromebooks, which we bought for her and gave her because she's convinced that the future of her kids is going to be tied to their ability to use that tool. And I think she's right.
I think she's right, too. And I think that was amazing. And you said it was the least that you could do. And I feel like for those of us who haven't been laid off, like we have an obligation to find those who need help and to try to help them. Let me give you the last word.
Well, we also have an obligation to keep our people busy. I sat here yesterday and did an episode of Returning the Favor, and I'm proud to do it because it got a dozen people engaged. I just did a new show for Discovery yesterday, sitting in the same spot. So if we're home and if we have the ability to pivot, then the opportunity is extraordinary to reconnect and figure out whatever it is we do. What's that look like in the age of Corona? You guys are doing it right now. Anybody with an internet connection is doing it right now. So, to sum up, ask for help if you need it and figure out a new way to skin the cat. There's always one out there.
Also, Mike Rowe, you're a national treasure, and your backdrop is perhaps the best of all of these Skype interviews I've seen. We'll have you back if you'll be willing to join us. Thank you so much.
All part of the value add, Dana. Thank you, and take care.
Bye-bye. Thousands of New Yorkers banding together to shop for and deliver groceries to the